Now, in terms of tools or protocols to both initiate and to sustain effort during your goal pursuit process, we need to think about the specific time domain or the amount of time that we're trying to do that within. So, for instance, there are tools that you can use to stay motivated within the 1 hour learning block that you happen to be doing on Monday morning, for instance. And there are other tools and protocols that you can incorporate towards staying motivated from one day to the next or from 1 week to the next. But I think the most useful of those tools are going to be the tools that you incorporate to stay motivated within a given training block or practice block toward your goal. Because what I just described a few minutes ago was the process of how to initiate your daily work, right? You ask yourself that question, am I motivated? The answer could be yes, could be no. If you really want to get, quantitative about it, you could give yourself a 1 to 10 score, 10 being the most motivated. Frankly, I'm not that quantitative about that sort of thing. I'm more subjective about it, but I know some of you are real number junkies and you really like to quantify everything, keep a journal and look back, see how that relates to your sleep. Some people are of that orientation. Other people like myself are simply going to, sit down and say, okay, it's time to train or it's time to practice, whatever the thing may be. How motivated am I? Am I like a 6 out of 10 or a 7 out of 10? Okay, I'm ready to go. I'm going to visualize the end in mind in a positive way. Or if I'm a 2 out of 10 or anything less than a 4 out of 10, I'm thinking I'm not that motivated. So then I'm going to basically scare myself into doing the work that day. So that's how you initiate the work each day. And I just gave you a couple of quick examples of how you could quantify that. It took me about 30 seconds to do that example out loud. It'll take you about 30 seconds to do. But again, if you want to quantify it in more detail and write it down and relate it to other things, be my guest. So now you already have a science-based protocol for how to get started each day toward your goal. Now, what about within the 1 or 2 hour block or perhaps 90-minute block that you're going to use to pursue your goal? And here, it's very important that you have a number of tools that will allow you to both set the optimal amount of focus so that you're really concentrating on pursuing that goal. You're concentrated on the verb actions that will deliver you to that goal is perhaps the best way to state that. And that you can constantly update or renew your level of focus should it start to dissipate. Now, I want to be clear. I've done entire episodes about focus and how to increase focus with behavioral tools, everything related to meditation, which indeed can increase your ability to focus. I've talked about nutritional tools, supplementation tools, prescription drug related tools. There's a lot of information on that. You can simply go to hubermanlab.com, put focus into the search function, and it will take you to not only those episodes and the toolkit for that, but the specific timestamps for that. But what we are going to talk about now is not about how to increase focus per se. Rather, it's about how to use focus, in particular visual focus, in order to increase your or maintain your level of motivation within a given learning block, within a given batch of time on a given day where you are pursuing your goal. You're engaging in that practice, which of course will include frustration, anxiety. It has to, if you're going to get any better. And how to set that motivation and keep that motivation throughout that hour or 90 minutes or 2 hours is critical. So how do you do that? Well, it turns out it's fairly straightforward. So it's anchored in the fact that your cognitive focus, your ability to maintain a narrow cone of attention, as well as your bodily state of readiness and your mental state of readiness to perform work, is powerfully anchored to your visual system. As many of you have heard me say before, your eyes are actually 2 pieces of brain. I mean, to be more specific, the neural retinas that line the back of your eyes, like pie crusts, are literally 2 pieces of your central nervous system of your brain that were extruded from the cranial vault during development. So yes, these 2 bits, and for those listening, I'm just pointing to my eyes. Your eyes are 2 pieces of brain outside of your skull, and your eyes can view things broadly. So you can so-called soften your gaze and view the entire horizon. You can see the periphery of the room by relaxing your eyes. You can actually do this now. In fact, when you drive, most of the time you're doing this. You're not looking at a particular focal point. You're viewing things in so-called panoramic vision. And of course, you can draw your visual focus to a particular location, what we call a vergence eye movement. That is, you're bringing your eyes in toward the center, toward your nose a little bit, and you're focusing them in a more narrow cone of visual attention. This is something you can do almost imperceptibly to others, although if we were to measure your eye movements, what we would see is that your eyes are actually moving inward a little bit toward your nose when you do this vergence eye movement and narrowing that cone of visual attention. And then they're relaxing into a state of being slightly further out from your nose, not the eyes themselves, of course, they can't move within the sockets, but the pupils of your eyes are moving out a bit from your nose, and you're in so-called panoramic vision. So essentially what I'm saying is that you can narrow or broaden your visual attention. And that's something that can take a little bit of practice. I highly recommend that you try this and that you practice it a little bit. But indeed, everyone has the neural machinery to do this from birth. This is not something that requires neuroplasticity to be able to do. You can do this right now. You can narrow your visual attention. You can expand or relax your visual attention and thereby narrow or relax your visual field from being smaller or larger. There are data that show that when we narrow our visual attention and we hold that narrow visual attention on a spot, several things happen. First of all, there's recruitment of circuitry within the so-called brainstem that then deploys neurochemicals that increase our level of alertness and arousal. That's right. When you focus your visual attention on a more narrow location or one location in front of you, and you hold that focus, you are causing the release of neurochemicals that increase your overall level of alertness in the brain and body. Conversely, when you relax your visual focus, so-called panoramic vision, you are turning off that recruitment. You're not actively recruiting molecules for relaxation within the brain, but you are turning off this release of the neurochemicals associated with increasing focus and arousal. So why am I talking about this in the context of goal pursuit? Well, if you are feeling lack of motivation at any point within a given training block or bout, as I'm calling it, this could be at the beginning, this could be 5 minutes in, this could be half an hour in, you would be wise to pick a visual target, ideally a visual target that is within the general range of the work that you're trying to perform. In other words, if you're doing desk work with a piece of paper, you would draw that visual target on a piece of paper approximately the same distance that you were reading or that you were looking at music. You can tell how little playing a piano I've done in my life. But the point being that you set the visual target at approximately the same distance that you would be performing your particular work. So if you're doing a sport, the distance might be some many meters off in the distance. Whereas if you're doing desk work of some kind, then it might be much closer. And then you focus your eyes on that location and you actively work to maintain that focus, just like I'm doing now, into the camera for a given period of time. And I recommend that you set a timer and that you, of course, allow yourself to blink like I just did there, and that you try and achieve at least 30 seconds. But even better would be 60 seconds. Even better would be 90 seconds of that focused Virgin's eye movement, during which several things happen, including the deployment of those neurochemicals from the brainstem that I talked about before, which are going to increase your level of autonomic arousal and also increase your level of focus further. And there, I'm not just talking about visual focus, I'm talking about cognitive focus. It has also been shown that when we focus on a particular point in the way that I'm describing here, that it increases our so-called systolic blood pressure. As many of you know, blood pressure is always described to us as a given number over another number. And the first number is the so-called systole or systolic pressure, which is the amount of pressure in your vascular system when the heart beats, as the fluid of your blood is pumping through the arteries, veins, and capillaries of your system. And then the bottom number is the amount of pressure within those arteries, veins, and capillaries in between heartbeats. So it's the systolic over the diastolic. And what we know is that visual focus, and here I'm still holding mine now on the camera. So for those of you listening, I probably blinked once or twice, but I'm really trying hard to maintain my focus directly within the camera. This visual focus increases the systolic blood pressure. It increases the deployment of those neurochemicals from the brainstem, and we know it also can recruit the liberation of molecules such as dopamine and some associated molecules elsewhere in the brain that together act in a synergistic way to increase our level of focus and motivation. This is based, again, on work describing the neural circuitry, what I'm describing here, and work from Emily Balcetis' lab, which has shown that if people focus on a target, on a goal line, literally a physical location within their environment, and then they initiate some work, it could be physical work or cognitive work, not only do they experience significantly decreased levels of perceived effort while engaging in that work, but they also complete that work in a significantly reduced amount of time, meaning that within a given training bout or training block, you are able to get significantly more work done, and you perceive that as less effortful or requiring less effort than had you not done this visual focus. Now, I've been doing this for quite some time now into the camera. This is actually a practice that I've been doing for well over a decade. And it's actually a practice that I use when I podcast or when I post on social media. It's part of the reason why I'm accused of being a non-blinker quite often. But I want to remind people that you are allowed to blink. Don't let your eyes dry out. It's perfectly fine to blink. It's not going to inhibit the effectiveness of this protocol. But I don't think I can really overstate how valuable this sort of protocol is. First of all, it's completely behavioral. It costs nothing. It's completely safe as long as you remember to blink. And it allows you to increase your level of focus, your level of motivation, and the sustainability of your focus and motivation while in goal pursuit. So it's a quite valuable protocol to incorporate, and it's something that you can do once for 30 seconds and then lean into whatever it is, your writing process, your running process. It's something that you could do repeatedly throughout that learning bout, and it's something that you can practice offline a little bit away from that training bout as a means to sort of learn and get familiar with, so that then you can incorporate it very quickly and repeatedly and with much more effectiveness during these different learning bouts. Again, it's a highly valuable tool that's grounded in neural circuitry, grounded in neurochemistry, and that Emily Balcetis' lab has shown in numerous domains, physical pursuits, cognitive pursuits, can really help people achieve their goals and to achieve them more easily, or at least with less perceived effort, and more quickly. Now, we can get a bit more granular about the incorporation of this tool, this protocol. But before we do, we should acknowledge that all of the things that lend themselves to improved cognitive focus and physical ability still hold true, right? You still need to get good sleep as many nights of your life as you possibly can. You still need to eat properly. You still need to try and limit your stress. We have podcast episodes related to all of those topics. We have toolkits available at zero cost related to all of those topics. I'm not saying that this visual focus or visual target training is the only tool that you should incorporate. It's a tool that you want to superimpose on the foundation of all the things that bring you to your practice with the best possible cognition, the best possible physical readiness. And that when added to that foundation of excellent sleep, excellent nutrition, social connection, sunlight in the morning, etc., is going to increase the probability that you're going to make those learning bouts as effective as possible. Now, some of you may be thinking, elevating your blood pressure is bad. Why would I want to elevate my blood pressure? Well, it turns out that the increases in systolic blood pressure achieved with this visual target training or focusing on a finish line for some period of time are transient, and they are perfectly safe. So essentially what it does is it boosts or bolsters the activity of the autonomic nervous system. It kickstarts the deployment of those chemicals and those neural circuits that then allow you to be motivated for some period of time. But then that is a transient increase in autonomic arousal, which is why perhaps every 20 minutes or perhaps on the hour, you might stop, do a 30-second or 60-second visual target training, and then lean back into your process of however it is you are pursuing your goal. I should also mention that if your eyes are getting tired doing whatever goal pursuit you happen to be engaged in, it's also a good idea to go into that panoramic vision mode. The easiest way to do that is to go outside or to be outside and to view a horizon and not look at any one particular point on the horizon. But if you're indoors, as I am now, you can also just relax your eyes, blinking a few times and getting rid of that Virgin's eye movement, and try and visualize the corners of the room, or the sides of the room rather, the floor and the ceiling all at once. That's a good way to explain how to so-called relax your eyes and take you out of that Virgin's eye movement. And I say this because a lot of people will feel when they're pursuing their goal that it's kind of fatiguing. So you have to remember to breathe, right? You still want to breathe as you're pursuing your goal, and you certainly want to be visually focused on your goal, so you're cognitively focused on your goal and you're motivated, but that from time to time you also relax, take a moment, shake things off, look into your panoramic vision mode, and then go back to your mode of goal pursuit.